Hey everybody, today is August 18th, 2018, and this is the 22nd edition of the weekly Gematria podcast. Thanks for joining me today. Today's date, the date of recording, August 18th, 2018, another palindromic date, if you will. Whether you go forwards, backwards, flip this date upside down, it looks the same, 8/18/18, just like last week, 8/11/18. So I see the chat is already hopping. We got Zach Hubbard down there, Young Decoder, Cliff Eberhard. Thanks, guys, for joining today. Should be a pretty good podcast today. We're going to go about 90 to 120 minutes or so, talking about news by the numbers. If you happen to be new to this line of study, allow me to introduce you to the ancient language of Gematria, which is the practice of coding numbers into words. It's a very, very simple practice. You simply assign a number to each letter in the alphabet relative to its position. We all grew up learning in alphabetic order, A through Z, and in Gematria, we simply number those letters 1 through 26. There's also the reduction method, where each double-digit number is reduced to a single digit using the rules of numerology. Both methods can then be reversed, and this gives us what we call our base 4 methods. And when you start paying attention to these base 4 methods, you start to realize very quickly that something very strange is going on with our mainstream media, with all the news that we're getting, and with all these people who are dying by the numbers, particularly these musicians, celebrities, and we'll talk about a couple more of those as we go on today. Two other ciphers I want to mention. These are the large number ciphers. We will be touching on these throughout the duration of the podcast. On the left, you see the English extended method. This more closely mirrors the ancient Hebrew Gematria and Greek isopsephy charts. And then there's Jewish Gematria, which is a slight modification based on the ancient Latin alphabet. And this cipher, as we've come to find, is extremely significant as well. So let's dive in here. We're going to start by talking about the top 4 news by the numbers stories of the week. And often I talk about how a lot of these stories are fake and fabricated, completely crafted by the numbers. What we also see is that real news stories, such as the fact that there's a heavy anti-Semitic rhetoric in Britain, and it's likely to be exaggerated in the media, but certainly this is something a lot of Jews do deal with, something a lot of Christians deal with too, by the way. But this story about anti-Semitism came out of Britain on the 17th, just yesterday. And I want to discuss why this story was released on this particular date. Now, normally I don't start off with the Jewish reduction cipher. This is based on the Jewish method, but reduces every letter to a single digit, just like the reduction methods. And of course, it stands to reason that this cipher is relevant. It's the Jewish cipher, and here we're talking about a story about Jews. In this cipher, anti-Semitism sums to 63, and the date that they released this story, August 17th, 8 plus 17 plus 20 plus 18 equals 63. And this is a perfect example of how the mainstream media is using dates on the calendar coinciding with this language of Gematria to release news stories. Of course, there's more to this, however. Using our standard 26-letter alphabet, anti-Semitism sums to 151. And 151 is a prime number. And as you'll come to find out as this podcast goes on, prime numbers are extremely significant to this study. This is any number that's only divisible by 1 and itself. So 151 being the 36th prime number. This date also with a life lesson number of 36. This is calculated by adding the month and the date, and then the individual digits of the year. Now, the 36th triangular number, right? So we talked about prime numbers. Triangular numbers are the numbers that you get when you add every number up, in this case, 1 through 36. If you do that, you get the number 666. So we call this the 36th triangular number, and so much of numerology is revolved around this number The first character that's interviewed in this story, his name is Mark Lewis. And in English Sumerian Gematria, this is still the alphabetic order, A through Z, with each letter multiplied by 6. And this is the cipher that's said to reveal the number of the beast. And what do you know? Mark Lewis, the first guy in the story, summoned to 666. There's one more reason this story came out on this date. The number 600, in the King James Bible, this is revealed as the number of the beast in Revelation 13:18. That's the 229th verse of Revelation. August 17th, the date of this story, is the 229th day of the year. Also worth noting that the word Jewish in one of our base ciphers equals 34, again matching the date numerology. One more thing that we're finding about these news stories and how they're constructed. As this podcast goes on, I'm going to give many examples of this, and I find this to be very significant in decoding these events. When a news story comes out of a particular nation, what you want to do is measure to that country's Independence Day or national holiday. If it happens in the United States, you look at the state, when the governor took office, perhaps when the state was admitted to the Union. Now, in this case, Britain doesn't really have a national day that's widely celebrated by everybody. Essentially, they just have the Queen's birthday. And the Queen's birthday is April 21st. Meaning that this story was published a span of 119 days later. And 119 is a very significant number to Judaism. Think about how the symbol, like on the flag of Israel, for example, is the Star of David. In the alphabetic order, Star of David equals 119. The word Orthodox equals 119, this word, of course, pertaining to Judaism. And there's a very Saturnian element to Judaism as well. You might know that the god El is the ancient Semitic deity that actually represents Saturn. And Saturn's nicknamed the all-seeing eye due to its rings, in the sky when you look at it. Kind of looks like an eyeball in the sky. All-seeing eye sums to 119 as well. They put the number 38 in this article. They said it was a 38-word International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. And the reason it's 38 words is because the word Jewish has gematria of 38. This method here, this is called single reduction. The only difference between single and full reduction is the S. S is the 19th letter. 1 plus 9 equals 10. So in single reduction, we just stop there. In full reduction, you add 1 plus 0 equals 1. The number 38, significant. What I'm teaching here, in fact, the language of gematria, this has a gematria value of 38. Gematria is rooted in the study of the Kabbalah. Kabbalah summing to 38 ordinal. And then another thing I'm going to show examples of throughout this podcast is how the media codes its headlines accordingly with numbers of the story and the date that the story was released on. So here we get a headline that says, anti-Semitism is so bad in Britain that some Jews are planning to leave. In reduction, this sums to 251, which is a prime number. It's the 54th prime number, again matching the date numerology. We talked about how Saturn is important to Judaism. Saturn summing to 93. The 93rd prime number, 487, which this headline also had. And as far as dates on the calendar go, consider that the Jews use a lunar calendar that's based on the moon. It uses actual months, actual lunar phases as months instead of our 28, 30, 31-day calendar. Anyway, this also has gematria of 361, which is 19 squared. And 19, the number of years in the moon's metonic cycle. So all of these numbers significant to Judaism in various manners. All right, our next, number 3, News by the Numbers story of the week, comes out of Florida, where a woman named Melissa Howard, who was running for the Florida House of Representatives, was busted for showing a fake diploma. You know, here she says she graduated from Miami University. Some people questioned the diploma, and it turns out the major that she had wasn't even offered at the university at the time or something like that. So completely busted, but again, this seems to be like a fake news story, and I can't tell you exactly why a news story like this would be fake, but please understand what the mainstream media is focused on is constantly distracting the public. You know, the idea of 24/7 news is to just feed people things that distract their minds. Not only that, but also feed them information they believe is important. So here it seems like there's, a crackdown going on fake politicians and whatnot. Anyway, this woman, her name is Melissa Howard. And first, let's look at the gematria of fake diploma. Using the alphabetic order, fake diploma equals 93. In the reverse order, fake diploma sums to 204. And here we're talking about a woman named Melissa Howard. Howard has this gematria of 93 reverse. And her full name sums to 204 reverse, the same two numbers as fake diploma. In fact, the word fake with ordinal and extended gematria values that match the date numerology, 23 and 32. Now, there's something else I want to point out that's a theme that's constantly used in these stories, especially around women. And it seems like this number 1313 is very significant when we're talking about stories with women. And, it has something to do with the divine feminine. I can't for the life of me right now remember whose video it was on YouTube that was decoding the movie There's Something About Mary. They did a really good job of showing all the times the number 13 is used in that film. And, of course, Mary, the name of Jesus' mom, Mary has the same gematria as moon, 57 and 51. And the moon, with 13 lunar phases every couple years, moon begins with the 13th letter. 13 even has the same gematria, 99, as the moon. So isn't it interesting here that this woman's name, at least her maiden name, was Melissa Marie Fox. So she's got the MM, the 1313. They also told us that she worked for Marriott and Microsoft after graduation. Again, MM, 1313. Now, when you multiply the number 13 by 13, you get 169, which is, again, 13 squared. And this woman's maiden name, Melissa Marie Fox, equals 169. Also interesting that she went to Miami, right? Or supposedly went to Miami, because the number 13 in gematria sums to 45 reduced, 99 ordinal. Miami equals 45 ordinal and 99 extended. All about the number 13, and it's worth pointing out this story was published on the 13th of the month, just this past Monday. All right, the number 2 news story of the week by the numbers. This story comes out of New Haven, Connecticut. And New Haven, Connecticut is the home of Yale University and the infamous Skull and Bones Society. Skull and Bones has given us 3 or 4 U.S. presidents to this point. I can't remember the exact count. Skull and Bones sums to 41. This story was released on a date with 41 numerology, by the way, which I find pretty interesting. But let's talk about the number that they actually gave us right here in the headline. We're told that more than 30 people overdosed on synthetic marijuana at Connecticut Park. Well, the number 30 is directly related to the gematria of overdose. Check out how the 30th prime number is 113. Using the reverse alphabetic order, the word overdose sums to 113. In reduction, overdose sums to 41, matching the date numerology down here, 8 plus 15 plus 18. But also in this method, synthetic marijuana sums to 113. And synthetic marijuana is said to be what these people overdosed on. The word marijuana itself sums to 34 in reduction. This story coming to us out of New Haven, 34 reverse reduction. And look at the dates, life lesson number, 8 plus 15 plus 2 plus 1 plus 8. It's 34. How about that shit, ladies and gentlemen? Another thing about this story that I found funny is that they kept saying this was in a New Haven park. And New Haven Park sums to 138 ordinal. This story on the date that leaves 138 days on the calendar. So date numerology of 41, this is also the 13th prime number. I got to take this numbers property screen off my stream here. I got to remember to do that, guys. All right. So the 13th prime number is 41. Synthetic marijuana has a nickname called K2. Well, K2 equals 13 ordinal. In numerology, zeros are ignored in the results. So the word overdose summing to 103, just like the number 13. And you got to laugh at this, right? All these people on overdose, you know people would be calling 911, right? Well, check out how long the governor of Connecticut has been in office. 91 months and 10 days. The governor of Connecticut, this is the same guy who was in office during the Sandy Hook shooting in Newtown. I always knew his name was Dan Malloy, right? But I didn't realize, I just figured it was Daniel. But it turns out his name is Danel. And what are we saying about El? El, the Semitic deity to the Jews, Danel, and we know who's running most of government here. So I found that pretty funny. Now, the mayor of New Haven, Connecticut, you know, we're going to talk about the death of this woman, Lyric McHenry, later on. She was a reality TV star in the show EJNYC, which was about Magic Johnson's son. We'll talk about that death later on in the second half of this podcast. But I couldn't help but wonder if this story about an overdose was a tribute to the death of Lyric McHenry, who died of a drug overdose just the day before. And the reason I say that is because Lyric McHenry and Tony Harp, the mayor of New Haven, share a birthday of August 6th, both born on 8/6. And how about this, right? She was born on 8/6/47, this governor, or mayor, Tony Harp. Born August 6th, 8/6, Tony Nathaniel Harp. Her full name sums to 86. And she was born in the year 47. Tony Harp equals 47. Also, Connecticut has Gematria of 883. 883 is a prime number. It's the 153rd prime number. Using the alphabetic order, Lyric McHenry equals 153. So does drug overdose, 153. And finally, the number one news story of the week. You may have seen this floating in the breaking news feature story headlines on CNN.com. I'm not sure if any other websites ran this story. I didn't really check. But I thought it was interesting to wake up and see a story from a year and a half ago on the front page regarding the Mayo Clinic. Again, something like this would normally be considered a local news story, but here in our Kabbalistic mainstream media, they'll pick, you know, local news stories from all around the country and just decide to put them in the national mainstream. And that's what we're getting here with the Mayo Clinic. And we all start off with the date numerology here. This date, August 13th, if you add 8 plus 1 plus 3 plus 20 plus 18, you get the number 50. In reduction, Mayo Clinic sums to 50. And if you read this story, you find out it's about a woman named Alyssa Gilderhoos, who had an aneurysm on Christmas Day of 2016. The name Gilderhus has gematria of 50, matching the date numerology. And in standard reduction, Christmas Day sums to 50. Now, the date August 13th is the 225th day of the year. The name Alyssa Gilderhus in the reverse alphabetic order sums to 225. Now, this means on August 13th, there's 140 days left in the year. Again, this news story about an aneurysm on Christmas Day, which sums to 140. The name Gilderhus, summing to 140 in the reverse order. So again, in numerology, these zeros get dropped, right? So this essentially reflects the number 14. The name Alyssa equals 14. The word 14 even equals 104. And this brings us back around to Mayo Clinic, which sums to 104, alphabetic order. In reduction, the city and state that Mayo Clinic is located in, Rochester, Minnesota, summing to 104, single reduction. Now, there's even more to this story, right? Like, just look at the life lesson number of that date that she had the brain aneurysm. It was 46. The name Gilderhus sums to 46 septenary. But, of course, more interesting is that aneurysm equals 46 in reverse reduction. It's even being said that this was a brain aneurysm. And aneurysm has single reduction gematria of 44. The word brain equals 44 ordinal. The name Alyssa Gilderhus sums to 44 in Chaldean, and this date of her aneurysm also had numerology of 44. And then the last thing that we'll look at that really brings this whole story together, the reduced numerology of the date that she had the aneurysm on Christmas 2016 sums to 19, right? And the date of this article was 19 months and 19 days after that aneurysm. In gematria, brain aneurysm equals 191. But what I actually think is more interesting than this 191, you can look at it as like a 19 forwards and backwards, I guess, right? But if you turn the number 19 upside down, you get the number 61. Brain aneurysm equals 61, reduction. Christmas equals 61, reverse reduction. 61 is a prime number. It's the 18th prime number. Again, the name of the woman in this story, Alyssa Gilderhus, sums to 180 alphabetic order. And I had to have a laugh because Escape from the Mayo Clinic even has this gematria of 1008 in Jewish. This is what they were calling it when they finally were able to pull her away. And, to end this, I'll even look at the date of death of William Mayo, who the clinic was named after, right? This story was 160 days after William Mayo died, or the anniversary of his death. And brain aneurysm equals 160, alphabetic order. So to me, this is like a perfect example from top to bottom of how these stories are constructed. And, yeah, if you ask me, this seems like a fake news story. I don't know who this Alyssa Gilderhus is or who her family is, but really makes you wonder what's going on once you take a look at the numbers, doesn't it? All right, so this brings us to, well, not necessarily our number one news by the numbers story of the week, but probably our top news story of the week, which is something that, not necessarily myself, but others in the community, particularly Dan Barrett, who's been talking about bridge symbolism all year. And, this led to the FIU bridge collapse in Miami. Just a couple months after that, we had a building collapse in Miami. And now a couple weeks later, we have this giant bridge collapse in Italy, which is responsible for the deaths of what they're saying is over 35 people now. Now, there's so many things that this bridge collapse measures up to, but what I'm going to be focusing on in this post is how this event relates to 9/11, the September 11th attacks back in 2001. This to me is the new terrorism that we're seeing. It's not necessarily that we're seeing people go and commit terror attacks, killing others. We're seeing weather warfare by the numbers. Now, it's being said that this bridge collapsed during a storm, torrential rainfalls, high winds. They also said that the bridge was under maintenance at the time. And I want to point out that the pedestrian bridge that collapsed in Miami by FIU was also undergoing some sort of maintenance. So are these maintenance crews or are they destruction crews? What the fuck is really happening? So let's start with this, right? I'm just going to show you how this is an undeniable ritual that's related to 9/11. And these disasters, this perhaps one of the biggest disasters in Italy in recent memory, right? So certainly it's going to be coded similarly. So this was called the Morandi Bridge that collapsed. Morandi has gematria of 254 in English extended. And this is a significant number. Of course, time equals 254. The date, September 11th, is the 254th day on the calendar. And in gematria, Morandi Bridge equals 119, a lot like the date 11/9, which is how most of the world writes September 11th. In reduction, Morandi Bridge equals 74. Morandi equals 74 ordinal. And notice how Morandi has the same gematria as killing in all four base methods. But 74 was a number significant to 9/11. Think about where the World Trade Center is located. If you look it up, the coordinates, you'll find it's just sitting almost perfectly, like within 2 blocks of the 74th meridian. New York, using the prime number cipher, this cipher, very basic, uses the alphabetic order 1 through 26, but uses associated prime numbers. Well, 373 is the 74th prime number. And 74, of course, this is a number that is so significant to this code. English 74, gematria 74. It's a simple practice, one rooted in Jewish mysticism. The word cross also 74, gospel 74, Messiah 74. Such a significant number, right? And of course, this ties into Morandi Bridge. So the collapse of the World Trade Center was a massive crucifixion reliving ritual, right? I mean, it's kind of hard to deny it when you look at the numerology, particularly what I exposed in my video. You got the 2 towers, of course, that look like a giant 11. Jesus equals 11. It was age 33 at which Jesus was crucified. New York has this gematria of 33. The date of the bridge collapse in Italy had a life lesson number of 33. And something I want to point out about the number 226, right? And this, again, ties back to the World Trade Center. So when you write out 33, you get these gematria values of 156 and 141. And when you write out either of these numbers in the alphabetic order, you get 226. See that? 226. Now, when you write out 226, you get 93 in gematria. And think about how the World Trade Center was bombed on February 26th, or 2/26, 1993. right? This is the code that they're using to construct their bullshit rituals. So 226, this super significant number. This bridge collapse occurring on the 226th day of the year. And the World Trade Center, right? We had groundbreaking in 1968, the same year that 911 became the emergency dialing code. George W. Bush graduating, or, skull and bones at that year, graduating Yale, whatever. And this Morandi Bridge was built in 1963 and finished in 1967, but CNN told us it was built in 1968. Just a straightforward lie from the media. No sources I could find indicating this bridge was constructed in 1968. But these people who we are supposed to believe are true professional journalists managed to fuck it up anyways, because they don't care about accuracy. They care about controlling your mind. Anyway, the number 68 has a prime number relationship of 337. 337, the 68th prime. And this bridge collapse happened 337 days after the anniversary of 9/11. In Jewish gematria, WTC has a value of 1003, 13 being a super significant ritual code. In fact, when you write out 13, you get a gematria of 2001, like the year of the 9/11 attacks, right? But anyway, what I want to point out about this is that Genoa sums to 103 in Jewish gematria. So WTC and Genoa sharing this 13 value. The 13th Fibonacci number is 233, and this collapse happened 203 months and 3 days after 9/11. And this is where it gets even more interesting. In Jewish gematria, Manhattan equals 321. And really the only other big city in America that I know of that has 321 gematria is Seattle. And think about how we just recently got a story about a plane being stolen from Seattle. Reminds you of 9/11 a little bit. And then crashed nearby, right? And now we get the collapse of the Morandi Bridge, which equals 321. Also, isn't that interesting? Well, now I'm just going to go off the cuff here, and I want to talk about Teddy Bridgewater. Think about how we got a bridge collapse in Minnesota back in 2007, right? We had a Minneapolis bridge collapse. And this happened on August 1st, 2007. Isn't it interesting that the football team from Minnesota has a quarterback named Teddy Bridgewater, when this is the same city that had a bridge collapse into the water just less than a decade prior? Well, Teddy Bridgewater got knocked the fuck out in a football game. He suffered a concussion, and I do think this was a legit injury, and it's hard to tell, but he gets hit from one side with a leg. It's his head snapping against the ground that causes the concussion, I believe. It's like two quick sudden movements, and the brain just shuts down. I mean, that's just what happens. So anyways, this happened on November 8th, 2015. Look how many days after the Minnesota bridge collapse that Teddy Bridgewater got knocked out. 3,021 days. How about that shit? And now here we are talking about the Morandi Bridge, which sums to 321, and how this all occurred in relation to a bridge collapse and 9/11. This is really spooky stuff, Truth Seeker, but you got to admit it's super fascinating. There's some 93s in here as well. We know 93 was big in 9/11. Genoa has gematria of 93. This bridge collapse happened 51 weeks and a day after the eclipse. And this is the first time I think I mentioned the 2017 eclipse in this podcast, but eclipses are the most significant markers of time to the dark occult. And those events are often what they align these things to, and you're going to see this as the podcast goes on. The mayor of Genoa, Italy, is Marco Bucci, who has this gematria of 511. Remember, Saturn equals 511 and 93, just like Genoa in the reverse order. So this Marco Bucci, he's got an interesting birth date. He was born October 31st, which means this bridge collapse happened 78 days or 11 weeks and a day before his birthday. Well, look at the gematria of New York. 78 reverse, 111 ordinal. Even the mayor's birthday is tied into this. So this upcoming birthday in October will be his 59th birthday. Well, on the date of the collapse, he was in office for exactly 59 weeks. 59 being a number of kill in Jewish gematria. Oh, there's so much more. I'm going to skip this part here. It's a lot to look at. I invite you to check the blog post, but for the sake of brevity, I want to jump to this 666. Because New York sums to 666 in Sumerian gematria. And again, 666, the number of the beast, per the Bible. If you multiply 6 times 6 times 6, you get 216. Genoa, Italy sums to 216 in one of our capital letter ciphers. Consider that 666 is revealed as the number of the beast once again in Revelation 13:18. Well, if you measure to the date that Marco Bucci took office as mayor of Genoa, it was exactly 13 months and 18 days. Beast equals 88. Marco Bucci equals 88. So that's the mayor of Genoa. What about the president of Italy, or the prime minister in this case? That man is Sergio Mattarella. And think about how in Revelation the beast rules for 42 months. This guy's been in office for 42 months, and he's 4,020 weeks old. Pretty crazy stuff. And just to cement this connection to 666 in the beast riddle, in Jewish gematria, the beast equals 311. And look at the gematria of this headline, 3,101, just like 311. Man alive. So I really think, I hope your minds are blown by this one, because this is just a massive, massive disaster ritual there in Italy. All right, so speaking of that Seattle plane crash, I touched on it in last week's podcast to kick things off. Now, the reason I want to talk about it again is because we've since gotten the name of the man who was responsible for this. And, of course, it's perfect. You know, I said it was going to tie into all these numbers we were already talking about, and no doubt it does. Let's begin with the name Richard Russell, English Ordinal 167. This guy committed suicide in a plane crash suicide 167. Hell, that might even be an accident. What we're going to talk about is the reduction gematria of Richard Russell. Notice how it sums to 68 and 94. What are the odds that these are the same two numbers you find in the gematria of Seattle, Washington? 68 and 94. And then comically, they told us he's from Wasilla, Alaska, which sums to 94 reverse reduction also. Using the alphabetic order, Wasilla, Alaska equals 122. Well, Seattle is on the 122nd meridian, but perhaps even more relevant is that it's on the 47th parallel. The incident fell on a date with 47 numerology. The word time equals 47 ordinal. Of course, 47 degrees on the Freemasonic compass. Seattle's got that restaurant on the Space Needle that spins once every 47 minutes. And check this out. The name Richard equals 47. The name Russell equals 47. Now, the 47th prime number is 211. And please remember this connection, this prime number relationship. It's going to be really important later. The name Richard Russell in the reverse alphabetic order equals 211. Another thing to note about this story is that it happened on a date with a life lesson number of 29, right? They even told us Richard Russell was 29 years old. And then they told us his nickname was Bebo, which equals 29. And to top this off, he crashed on Keytron Island. Keytron sums to 29 in reduction. And this story is actually related to the Richard Russell story, as I'm going to discuss, but first let's talk about NASA a little bit. No one loves numerology more than NASA. Well, there may be some people, but NASA, ever since day one, it's pretty much what they've been all about. So now we're getting a story about a probe that's supposedly being launched into the sun. And, you know, of course these rocket launches are real. Whether or not the probes that are going into deep space are, I don't buy it, you know. They always give us these computer imagery of it, and it doesn't seem like the science they're really collecting from these voyages is really all that life-changing, you know. But all that aside, let's talk about the date on which this rocket was launched. August 12th, the date of the launch, was the 224th day of the year. And it's being said that this probe is being launched to the sun's corona. Corona equals 224 in Jewish Gematria. In fact, the Gematria of this headline sums to 224. On mission to touch the sun, Parker's solar probe has launched. The date of the launch also had numerology of 58. NASA fully embracing Freemasonic numerology. Freemasonry equals 58. The 58th prime number is 271, and this headline equals 271 reverse reduction. The reduced numerology of the date was 22. Mission to touch the sun equals 253 in the reverse order, which is the 22nd triangular number. And you also got to appreciate the gematria of Parker. Parker equals 93. The sun, 93 million miles away. Of course, this is where the Parker probe is supposedly headed, to the sun. So originally, the probe was scheduled to launch the day before, but it was delayed. Turns out it went out at 3:31 in the morning. And isn't it interesting that in this secondary Kabbalah cipher, mission to touch the sun equals 331? But 331 is a prime number. It's the 67th prime number to be exact. Rocket launch equals 67. 67 is the 19th prime number. And mission to touch the sun equals 109. So there's a nice little, connection here. Again, this number 19 significant to time. It's the number of years in the Metonic cycle. In Greek, time equals 109 and 1090 if you use isopsophy. In the alphabetic order, Parker's solar probe equals 190. And think about how, solar eclipse 190. And it's interesting because every 19 years, we often get a solar eclipse on the same date as we did 19 years prior. And it's strange, of course the Parker probe won't be eclipsing the sun, but it will be between us and the sun. Notice how solar eclipse has the same gematria, 503, 433 in Jewish. Parker probe, 503 extended, 433 in Jewish. So as far as how this is related to the story about Richard Parker, or Richard Russell. Think about it, right? One guy named Richard steals an airplane and crashes it. Meanwhile, you have a Parker probe with a successful launch. And a special shout out to Bobby. He's got that channel, Casey Jones Astrology, as his blog. And I should be linking his channel in my description. I'm sorry I don't have that, but maybe he can drop a link in the chat. He pointed this out to me, and it's really interesting, right? There's this movie called Life of Pi. And the tiger, I think it is named Richard Parker, right? Is it the tiger? Yeah, the Bengal tiger is named Richard Parker. And look at the published date of Life of Pi, September 11th, 2001. Can you believe that? Publication date 9/11, the same date as the 9/11 attacks. And here we're talking about how this whole Richard Russell story is tied into the 9/11. You know, Seattle, Manhattan, both having the same gematria. Oops. Isn't it interesting, by the way, that in Life of Pi, the guy is stranded for 227 days? Of course, it's Alt 227 that gives you the pi symbol. And it's 22 divided by 7, both on a calculator in Gematria, that gives you 314. So there's a couple things to mention, I guess. You know, pi equals 29. And remember, Bebo equals 29. He was 29 years old. Crashed into Keytron equals 29 on a date with 29 numerology. The date of the plane crash was August 10th, written 8/10. The main character of Life of Pi, his name sums to 810 in Jewish gematria. So I invite you to check out my post to kind of go through the rest of this, but it's pretty interesting, right, that we're talking about all these relationships to 9/11, and it's a clear tribute to Life of Pi with these news stories. This next story I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on because I did do a video on this on Thursday, so please check out my Gematrinator 85 YouTube channel out if you want the deep dive on this. But I want to talk about this psycho dad, Chris Watts, who is said to have murdered his family in Colorado. Well, let's start with Colorado, which sums to 83 alphabetic order. The name Watts equals 83. And this is a story about murder. Murder equals 83. Murder also equals 79, standard alphabetic order. This story comes to us out of Frederick, Colorado, which sums to 79. In reduction, murder equals 34. The name Watts equals 34, reverse reduction. And look at this. His wife, Shanann Watts, was 34 years old. Their two daughters that he also killed were 3 and 4 years old. And they told us that she's also 15 weeks pregnant with their third child. The word 15 equals 34. This news story came out on a date with double numerology of 33. And granted, this was in the news prior, but this was the date that we found out that this guy was the killer. The name Chris equals 33. Using prime numbers again, 33 equals 5:15. Notice what time he left for work on the day of the murders, 5:15 a.m. There's a whole lot more to this story, Truth Seeker. I don't want to get too deep into this. We got a lot to talk about. Please check out my video on my channel to see how this was completely constructed by the numbers. 100% fake news. I just realized I never started my audio podcast, so thanks to YouTube for hosting the live stream today, I guess. Ay, ay, ay. All right, so we're talking about police brutality in Baltimore, Maryland as our next story. And we'll go into break right after this here. So the first thing, I actually led off with the gematria of the headline because it sums to 653 ordinal. 653 is the 119th prime number. And of course, this is the inverse of 911, the emergency dialing code. In gematria, fraternal order of police equals 119 in the reduction method. And of course, that's what this story is completely celebrating here. So here we have the guy who was getting beat up in the story was named Deshaun McGreer. The name Deshaun also sums to 119 reverse. If you flip that 9 upside down, you get a 6. And his last name is McGreer, which is 116. The full name, Deshaun McGreer, in reduction, sums to 71. This is the same as police brutality, which sums to 71. And of course, this is what this man is in the news for. Notice how the name Deshaun McGreer equals 143 English ordinal. Well, this is a number I do commonly talk about. It's the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry that controls the police departments in this nation. It controls the mainstream narrative that talks about all these stories. Baltimore Police Department also sums to 143. Just like the name gematria of the guy that they beat up in this story. It just never fails. In the reverse order, Deshaun McGreer equals 235. If we use capital letters, called Francis Bacon gematria, you'll notice in this cipher, Baltimore, Maryland equals 235 as well, matching the name of the victim. Also, the date of this story had 49 and 58 numerology. Baltimore equals 58. Baltimore, Maryland with the abbreviation equals 49. Again, Freemasonry summing to 58, just like Baltimore. The ordinal gematria of Baltimore Police Department is 271. And 271 is the 58th prime number. Again, this story coming out on a date with 58 numerology out of Baltimore 58. All right. Ah, I see. Baltimore, Maryland with the abbreviation equals 112, right? And the 112th prime number is 613, and that's how many days the mayor of Baltimore had been in office when the news story was released. The date the video was taken was the 223rd day of the year, August 11th. The word Masonic equals 223. And the governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan, had been in office for 3 years, 202 days, which is the inverse of 223. And, of course, 322, that skull and bones number, right? We know how significant that 322 can be. This was another news story that came out on the 224th day of the year. And just like the story about NASA's Parker probe, the headline had gematria of 2024, right? So once again being attributed through the date numerology. Also, this was 105 days after Maryland was admitted to the Union. Maryland, I think, 1788 was the year that it was admitted. The word masonry equals 105. So does Baltimore, Maryland in reverse reduction. This story 105 days after the anniversary of when Maryland was admitted to the Union. All right, so with that, I'm going to jump on break. Going to play a little music from a DJ named Kolsch, whose SoundCloud page is going to be linked down below. All right, Truth Seekers, we'll be right back. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Got that audio working again. What do you say? All right. Should have learned my lesson earlier in the week when I went like 3 minutes with no audio, right? So in the second half of this podcast, we're going to talk about a couple of these shootings that have been in the news lately. We're going to transition into the murder by numbers section of the podcast and then finally talk about some history by numbers. And just to quickly touch on the chat, I have not decoded the death of Kofi Annan yet. I just woke up to that news this morning, didn't do really any work. I guess there was a couple things that stuck out, right? The name Kofi Annan sums to 85. He was the UN Secretary General, which I believe is 85 in reduction. The official title was Secretary General of the United Nations, which sums to 190. He died exactly 19 weeks and 0 days after his birthday. And, the 19th prime number is 67. That's our blood sacrifice, human sacrifice number. Like Zach said, the numerology of the date, 44, 64. And I think he died like 7 months and 22 days before his birthday also, for some more pi connections as well. All right, so first we got the Moss Side neighborhood shooting in Manchester, England. So what do you know, right? You type out Moss Side, you get Gematria of 31 in reduction, and using the S exception, you get 58. And the date numerology of the shooting, of course, 31 and 58. In reverse reduction, Moss Side equals 50. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Theresa May, is 50 days before her birthday on that date. In the reverse alphabetic order, Moss Side equals 113. This shooting was 113 days after the equivalent of Manchester's mayor. They don't have a mayor, but they do have a leader of the city council. This shooting 113 days after his birthday. And, of course, 113, our number of dishonesty. Dishonest 113, not true 113, fiction 113 reverse, and even the word bullshit 113. This shooting happened during the Caribbean Carnival. And this year's festivities celebrated the 70th anniversary of the Windrush generation, who arrived in England after the British Nationality Act of 1948. Windrush generation has Chaldean gematria of 70. This was the 70th anniversary. But look at the alphabetic order. Windrush generation equals 224, and the shooting was, again, the 224th day of the year. Next, we're going to talk about a shooting at a Jacksonville McDonald's. And, here's another one where, I don't know. Is it staged? Is it fake? It might be. It's just impossible to know, but I'm going to run the numbers and show you something really weird is going on once again. The name of the woman who was killed in the McDonald's drive-thru was Jamie Marie Roque. Her name in reduction equals 79. The word murder equals 79 in ordinal. And again, in reverse, murder equals 83. And look at what time she was shot. 8:30 a.m. as she was ordering food. Now, so many of these deaths are centered around the crucifixion code, and this does seem to be the case here. Jesus Christ sums to 43 and 151, reduction in ordinal. Jacksonville equals 43. And Jacksonville, Florida, when abbreviated, equals 151. In fact, this was a Jacksonville McDonald's. This sums to 74 in reduction, just like Jacksonville on its own, 74. So Jesus was crucified at age 33. crucifixion of Jesus Christ equals 303 in Gematria. This language of letters and numbers, of course, rooted in the Bible, the story of the crucifixion being of utmost importance to this. Now, in reduction, crucifixion of Jesus Christ equals 123. This shooting occurred 12 weeks and 3 days after the anniversary of McDonald's establishment on May 15th. This measurement also converts to 2 months and 26 days. Crucifixion of Jesus equals 226. It's also been 22 weeks and 6 days since Florida's date of admission to the Union. And, how interesting is this, right? Crucifixion of Jesus equals 226. The word sacrifice equals 226. Jesus was crucified at age 33, which sums to 895. That's the same as ritual human sacrifice, 895. So this measurement, right, if you measure from the date that Florida was admitted to the Union on March 3rd to August 10th, the date of the shooting, it was exactly 160 days. The name Jamie Marie Roque, who died in this story, equals 160. This number 160 represents the number 53, 160 represents 16, of course. Now, the 16th prime number is 53, right? And this woman is said to have died at a shooting in a drive-thru, which both sum to 53. So what about the governor of Florida, Rick Scott? This guy always measures up to these things. Notice how it's been 218 days since the date that he took office. Again, we're talking about a story at a Jacksonville McDonald's, 218. The word death also summed to 218 in English Extended. Of course, this news story occurring in 2018. I did look up the mayor of Jacksonville. His name is Lenny Curry. He's got Gematria of 2018. How about that? In reduction, Lenny Curry equals 56, matching the full numerology of the date of the shooting. 8 plus 10 plus 20 plus 18. But here's the real kicker on this story, right? I mean, already we've seen that something's going on here with the numerology, arguably. Consider that this shooting was 31 weeks and 1 day after the anniversary of Rick Scott taking office. On top of that, it's 113 days before his birthday. And again, 113, the number of dishonesty. In reverse ordinal, it sums to 311. So you have this 113, 311 sequence. In addition to these alignments here, also consider that the mayor of Jacksonville has been in office for 3 years, 1 month, 1 week, and 3 days, 3113, just like the governor of Florida, 3113. So this is the kind of thing that I hope people are really paying attention to, because, we got to somehow advance this, I guess, if we really want people to wake up to it. And this just screams hoax right here, these alignments with both the mayor and the governor. McDonald's turned exactly 3,304 weeks on the date of this shooting. Shooting has Gematria of 334 in primes. I find that kind of interesting. It's also been 117 days since the anniversary of McDonald's becoming a corporation. And Jacksonville, Florida, 117. So I can totally see how I might lose somebody on a decode like this, because we're looking at so many different dates, but to me it's rock solid, especially once you get to this 311, 113. It's just too wild. Oh, and I didn't even mention this was 11 months and 3 weeks after the eclipse. And that might be the most important thing of this all, you know, that measuring to the eclipse. So you have like triple alignments, quadruple alignments with 113 in this news story, just screaming for a hoax. And I think that's what we got. All right, so next let's talk about the death of Aretha Franklin. Aretha Franklin, dead on August 16th. Ironically, the same date that Elvis died. We'll talk about some of these alignments in a minute, but I first want to point out that she died at age 76. This is one of those blood sacrifice numbers in single reduction, 76. This headline that they gave us on CNN had Gematria of 760, and that's with all reduction exceptions. This cipher, by the way, all exceptions, consider this like the opposite of full reduction. Because in full reduction, it's just the alphabetic order down to a single digit. But with all exceptions, we reverse the order, we only reduce once, and we don't reduce master numbers, 11 and 22. So this, you know, still holds true to the rules of numerology. It just uses all exceptions. So yeah, this Gematria, 760 in that cipher. She's dead at age 76. Her death was also aligned to the most recent and next total solar eclipses, and I'm going to show you how. She died exactly 360 days after the 2017 Great American Eclipse. Of course, there's 360 degrees in a circle. The name Aretha Louise Franklin in Sumerian Gematria sums to 1314. So you have these digits 314 like pi. And she died 31 weeks and 4 days before her birthday. Of course, 314, pi, all about the mathematics of the circle. Now, if you measure to the next total solar eclipse, which falls on July 2nd, 2019, you find it's 321 days. Aretha Louise Franklin equals 321, reverse alphabetic order. And perhaps by coincidence, I don't know, Aretha Louise has the same gematria as solar eclipse in the 4 base methods and in the Kabbalah. Now, her name in ordinal sums to 219. The word feminism equals 219. Of course, Aretha Franklin credited with empowering black women all over the world, and hopefully all women as well. Now, if you know, she died shortly before the year 2019, right? So if you measure from the date of her death to the first day of 2019, you find it's exactly 138 days. Aretha Franklin sums to 138. Next, we're going to talk about the number 33. So 33 is a significant number of sacrifice, as I like to think I demonstrate quite well in this slide right here. Well, if you add every single number up 1 through 33, you get the number 561. The name Aretha Franklin, using English extended gematria, sums to 561. Singer Aretha Franklin also sums to 330 reverse order. And she died in relation to these eclipses. Eclipse equals 33. The date on which she died, August 16th, 2018, has multiple methods that reach 33 numerology. Now, the 33rd prime number, 137, The date that she died leaves 137 days in the year. And of course, I mentioned how this 33 is related to the crucifixion code. Crucifixion of Jesus Christ, summing to 303 and 123. Notice how the word crucifix also summing to 123. Well, the name Aretha Louise Franklin sums to 123. So does singer Aretha Franklin, right? 123. The 123rd prime number is 677. And in the prime number cipher, Aretha Louise Franklin equals 677. All right, but on the more simple side of this, let's look at the date she died. 8 plus 1 plus 6 plus 2 plus 1 plus 8. This sums to 26. This is the same reduced numerology as her birth date, March 25th, 1942. Add all the digits together. You also get 26. The name Aretha equals 26. She was called the Queen of Soul. Queen is sums to 26. And it's being said that she died from cancer. Cancer sums to 26. Born on and dead on a date with 26 numerology. The date she died also with alternate numerology of 53. Aretha, 53 ordinal. Notice how she was born in 1942, died on a date with 42 numerology. 42, also significant to the crucifixion code. It's the New Testament in which the Gospels tell us about the crucifixion. New Testament equals 42. The first King James Bible is 42 lines. Also, the 42nd prime number is 181. And in Gematria, Jesus the Messiah equals 181. The word eclipse equals 42 also in single reduction. And then if you look at Jewish Gematria, Jesus the Messiah equals 1331, which is the number that actually does represent a solar eclipse. Now we're going to talk about how her death measures up to those deaths of other famous musicians, particularly ones from Detroit. But first, we'll talk about Elvis. Now, Aretha Franklin, I believe she finished up her career in Memphis, Tennessee, and that's where she was kind of based out of, right? Well, she was born in Memphis, okay. Elvis died in Memphis, or at least that's where he's buried. She died on the same date that Elvis did, exactly 41 years to the day later. The word king equals 41. Elvis, the king of rock and roll. Now the queen has died exactly 41 years after him. What's also interesting is how she's named the Queen of Soul. You might also remember a musician named the King of Pop. That was Michael Jackson, right? Well, if you measure from the death of Michael Jackson to the death of Aretha Franklin, it was exactly 477 weeks. In Gematria, ritual sacrifice sums to 477. And just this past year, we had the Las Vegas shooting, the deadliest shooting of all time. That occurred exactly 477 days after the previous deadliest shooting of all time, which was at the Pulse nightclub. 477 days apart. The Society of Jesus right now, by the way, is still 477 years old until this next month. So she's dead in relation to Elvis and Michael Jackson. Next, we'll look at other musicians from Detroit. Detroit, the city where Aretha Franklin got her start. The date that Aretha died had reduced numerology of 26 and full numerology of 62. And this stands out because in reverse, Motown equals 26 and 62. Now in Jewish gematria, Motown equals 1,170. And, you know, our main ritual code 13 has this gematria of 117, so this is a significant number already. We'll look at these two guys. You got a famous rock star from Detroit and then a famous rap artist from Detroit. One of them was born on 117, January 17th. The other was born on October 17th, 1017. So both of these guys have 117 coded into their birthdays. Kid Rock also with this number stamped into his real name. The word rock equals 47, alphabetic order. Kid Rock is currently 47 years old. And if you measure from his 47th birthday to the death of Aretha, you get 211 days. Think about how killing equals 47 in reduction with the K exception. Ritual human sacrifice equals 211, which is the 47th prime number, as we talked about in the first half of this podcast. Also, the word killing equals 211 in prime numbers, and killing also summing to 47. So Kid Rock was 47 years and 211 days old when Aretha Franklin died. That's pretty interesting. Now think about how Jonathan Davis, the lead singer of Korn, he was born one day after Kid Rock, right? One day after Aretha died, his estranged wife mysteriously died. And Jonathan Davis was also 47 years, 211 days old on that date. Next, we'll look at this death in relation to Eminem. Eminem turns 46 in a couple of months. The word rap equals 46. Michigan equals 46, but this is also a number of sacrifice. Sacrifice equals 46. In reverse reduction, sacrifice equals 62. And Marshall Mathers was 62 days before his 46th birthday on the date of her death. Also, check this out. Marshall Mathers sums to 168. The date Aretha died, August 16th, written 16/8. And if you look at her full name, Aretha Louise Franklin, you'll see she also has this 168 with all reduction exceptions. So yeah, this record industry, when I call the record industry part of the cabal, this is exactly what I mean. This class of people, essentially, which is practicing Kabbalah, using it to control the minds of the masses who's buying its music and paying money to keep it afloat. All right, the next death by numbers that we'll talk about here is the death of wrestler Jim the Anvil Neidhart. So Jim Neidhart was part of the Hart Foundation. He tag teamed with Bret Hart, was a former multi-time tag team champion in the WWE. He's actually the third member of the Hart Foundation to have died now. Bret Hart is the only living guy left. And we'll talk about that, but first I want to talk about his daughter, Natalya, who is a current wrestler on the WWE roster. This woman is a former Divas champion back when they had the Divas belt several years ago. She's also a former SmackDown Women's Champion. So Jim Neidhart has died at the age of 63. I find it interesting that his daughter Natalya Neidhart equals 63 in Gematria. The name Neidhart on its own equals 79. The word murder equals 79. And this guy's dead 79 days after Natalya's birthday, with the end date included. Natalya's birthday, May 27th, to the date of her father's death, is also a span of 2 months and 18 days. Natalya was born on the date that leaves 218 days in the year. Of course, this is the year 2018 once again. The word death equals 2018 in extended. Now, in addition to dates on the calendar, also time on the clock is significant to this. 2 hours and 18 minutes, think about this as 138 minutes, right? Well, Jim Neidhart is dead on August 13th, the date written 13/8. This actually brings us to the death of the British Bulldog, who died on the 138th day of the year. The British Bulldog being a former tag team partner of Jim Neidhart. If you measure from the anniversary of the British Bulldog's death to the date of Neidhart's death, look at this, you get a span of 2 months and 27 days. And this is, of course, a super significant ritualistic number. Ritual and symbolism equals 227. This is one of the mottos of the ancient accepted Scottish rite of Freemasonry, summing to 227. This number integral to the mathematics of the circle. So the date that the British Bulldog died, May 18th, that was the date that leaves 227 days in the year. Now, Neidhart dead 2 months, 27 days later. Now, if you instead measure to the death of Owen Hart, remember Owen Hart died from falling from the rafters during that pay-per-view? From Owen Hart's death to Jim Neidhart's death is exactly 7,022 days. I'm telling you guys, it ain't a coincidence. This is how these rituals operate. And Owen Hart, by the way, he might have some of the most interesting numerology of any of these people, right? Again, 227 related to the mathematics of the circle. In Jewish Gematria, mathematics of the circle equals 666. In Sumerian, Jim Neidhart equals 666. See that? Owen Hart, right? So Owen Hart died in 1999. When you flip 1999 upside down, it's 666. He died exactly a span of 6,666 days before the Great American Total Solar Eclipse. I feel like I need to bring this up just to hammer it home, right? So Owen Hart, when was his birthday? May 7th. Let's see. He was 34 when he died, so he must have been born in 65. Yep. So Owen Hart was born May 7th, 1965. If you measure to the 2017 Great American Total Solar Eclipse, he was born exactly 19,099 days before the eclipse, right? He would then die in the year 1999. And if you measure from the date he died to the eclipse, it's 6,666 days. That's really mind-blowing stuff to me, right? Especially considering that he died in 99. The 99th prime number is 523, and he died on 523. That's pretty wild stuff, guys. And just think about how, Jim Neidhart, right? Jim the Anvil Neidhart. His name is Neidhart, but he's not related to the Harts. He married into the family. So what are the odds that a guy named Neidhart marries into the Hart family to begin with? Is this guy's real name? Are these people all sworn to secrecy? Are they all oath-keeping? Can't help but wonder if that's the case. Speaking of Owen Hart, by the way, and there's a couple more interesting things about this guy, right? Jim Neidhart, his name sums to 186. He died 186 days after his birthday. He also died on a date with 59 numerology. That's the Gematria of kill. And his name in Chaldean sums to 59. Okay, one more thing about Owen Hart and the British Bulldog, the other two Hart family members who died. In Jewish Gematria, Owen James Hart equals 1910, right? So you got a 191. The British Bulldog equals 191. His real name was David Smith, which sums to 161 or 191 upside down. And if you measure from the date that Owen Hart died to the date that the British Bulldog died, it was 1,091 days, 191. So 100% Truth Seeker, these guys are either being ritualistically murdered by this code, or our God has a sick sense of humor, and he's just killing people off by the numbers. I don't know which one I prefer to believe, honestly. I guess the latter, but it doesn't seem that way. I guess you could also say these are all just rituals and nobody's dying, but who really knows? All right, next we're going to talk about the death of reality film star Lyric McHenry. She died on August 14th. Internationally, this date is written 14/8. She was known for being a reality star, which sums to 148, English ordinal. She died on a date with the life lesson number of 33. Of course, that's a number of sacrifice, right? Notice how her name starts with Mick, MC, which has 33 Gematria. Her name also sums to 303 in Frank Baconis, one of our ciphers that uses capital letters, alternating with small letters. When you write out 33 in Jewish Gematria, we get this value of 148. It's the same as ritual sacrifice, 148. The name of the show that she was on was EJNYC, which sums to 1048. See how that works. Now, she died at the age of 26. Irvin Johnson III, who was the main character of EJNYC, he was also 26, right? The 26th prime number is 101, and he was 10 weeks and 1 day after his 26th birthday when she died. But more interesting is how old his dad was, right? So, man, where did I put this? Irvin Johnson, otherwise known as Magic Johnson, the reason that this guy, E.J. Johnson, I mean, a real freak show here. Look at this guy. Can you believe this? What is that? Anyway, that's just what's going on. So Magic Johnson, on the date that this woman was found dead, he turned 59 years old. Of course, the word Negro equals 59. So does the word slave, 59. The word kill also summing to 59. 59 is the 17th prime number. And the word kill also equals 17. The 17th triangular number is 153. Both Lyric McHenry and drug overdose equals 153. They have both the same gematria. All right, something else that's pretty interesting about this, right? I want to point out the gematria of blood sacrifice, 67 and 86 in reduction. These are the same numbers as human sacrifice, 67, 86 reverse. Lyric McHenry was born on 8/6, like 86. The name Lyric equals 67 ordinal, and then her last name, McHenry, equals 86, right? And now she's dead in a blood sacrifice ritual. They said that she was found dead at 5:05 a.m. The word sacrifice equals 55. In satanic gematria, ritual human sacrifice equals 9/11, and her death fell 9 months and 11 days after the anniversary of the show being axed, right? And that show was canceled on 1/13, that number of dishonesty. The last thing I want to talk about in relation to this woman's death is her, the gematria of the headline that they gave us is just wonderful. In reduction, both English and Jewish, it sums to 357. On the date she died, she was 1,357 weeks old, and she was 357 days before her birthday. So this double gematria attribute to the double alignment on the calendar with 357. The word Freemason also 357, and I wouldn't have brought this up, but notice how in satanic gematria, the headline sums to 3,250, which is another clue for the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry 325 ordinal. The date of this story leaves 139 days on the calendar. Freemasonry equals 139. And they even said she died on a sidewalk. Sidewalk equals 1,039. Finally, in Jewish gematria, the headline sums to 5,730. And in satanic gematria, both lyric McHenry and drug overdose equals 573. Real cute stuff they did there in the headline, isn't it? All right, next we're going to talk about the death of Janus, who is the lead singer of a band called Huntress. And here's yet another example of where the media is blatantly reporting the wrong age. So you look this woman up, you look at her age, you find she's 42 years old. She was born in September of 1976. Or, I'm sorry, 1975. So she's still 42. However, the media finds it necessary everywhere to report that she's 43 years old. Well, why would they report that she's 43 instead of her real age, 42? Her name, Jill, using the alphabetic order, equals 43. And in single reduction, the word suicide also sums to 43. Worth mentioning that killing equals 43 in the reverse method. On top of this, consider that 43 is the 14th prime number. And she died on the 14th day of the month. Let's see. So the word suicide in reduction sums to 34, right? You also get a 47 reverse. The name of her band was Huntress, which also sums to 34 and 47. The name Janus summing to 34 like suicide. In prime numbers, Jill Janus, 340. And you got to admit, it's kind of interesting that murder and suicide both sum to the same number, right? And they're both attributed here in this story. The 34th prime number, meanwhile, is 139. And the date that she died left 139 days in the year, once again. Also, suicide equals 70, alphabetic order. The name Janus equals 70 in reverse. She was the Huntress singer, sums to 70. Found out here that she was a span of 347 days after her birthday. This is the Hebrew gematria of sacrifice, 347. Also, this was a span of 20 days before her next birthday. Notice how death equals 20 in reduction, just like Janus. This woman was born on a date with a life lesson number of 33, died on a date with a life lesson number of 33. The word rock star equals 33 in reduction. And again, 33 connected to 226. She died on the 226th day of the year. Perhaps most interesting of all of this to me anyway, because again, I'm here exposing how the record industry is using this Kabbalistic numerology to kill off its artists, whether or not they're really dying, I don't know. Now, the last album that Huntress released was on September 25th, 2015. And if you measure from that date to her death, it's 1,054 days. The term ritual sacrifice equals 154. No fucking mystery what's going on here, guys. All right, so to cap this podcast off, we're going to do a couple of history by the numbers stories. And this first one was inspired by the fact that Tiger Woods recently surged back to the top of the majors leaderboard, placing second at this year's PGA Championship. And I just want to briefly discuss the very simple numerology of his dad's death and how it relates to the story about him, driving out of his own driveway, crashing his car on sleeping pills and all that shenanigans from 2009. So we just talked about this number 59, right? The word Negro, 59, slave, blues, all summing to 59. And, 5 and 9 are the only two numbers to sum to 42. 42 being the gematria of the N-word in reduction. So this is an important number, right? Well, check out Earl Dennison Woods, Tiger Woods' father. He was born March 5th, 1932. 3 plus 5 plus 19 plus 32 equals 59. He would then go on to die 59 days after his birthday. And look at the gematria of his son's name. Tiger equals 59. Woods equals 59. Reverse. Tiger also has symmetrical gematria. Check this out. Tiger Woods equals 135 in the alphabetic order. It also equals 135 in the reverse order. On my blog, I put 2 ordinal finds. It's also 135 in reverse. Well, if you measure from the death of his father to the date that Tiger Woods officially made national news for that incident in the driveway with his wife, it was exactly 1,305 days later. On that date, with Elin chasing him out of the garage with a golf club, just a tremendous visual, by the way. I really would have loved to have been there. On that date, Tiger Woods was in his 333rd day of being 33 years old, okay? So you can't tell me this ritual wasn't constructed by the numbers. This was really the ultimate public sacrifice of Tiger Woods' character, when you think about it. He's never won a major title since. All we heard about was the collapse of Tiger Woods after this. The date of this incident, 11/27 plus 20 plus 09, this sums to 67. Again, our blood and human sacrifice number, 67. Also, the 67th prime number is 331, and the date of the incident was the 331st day of the year. Oof. All right. Truth Seekers, the last story that we're going to cover here. The last history by numbers for this week. I'm going to go back in time to last January. And I bring this story up because the shooter of this incident was just sentenced yesterday. And I'll explain everything about why this shooting occurred on the date it did and why it took so long for him to be sentenced to jail. So we've been talking about the Great American Total Solar Eclipse occasionally throughout this podcast and how important it's been to these rituals, right? Well, this shooting here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, occurred exactly 227 days before the total eclipse. And in Hebrew, the phrase total eclipse equals 227. And think about how the Boston Marathon bombing, if you measure from the date that occurred to the date of the eclipse, the same one, it's exactly 227 weeks. That bombing was supposedly carried out by the Tsarnaev brothers. Tsarnaev brothers equals 227 reverse. But there's more alignments here. The governor of Florida at the time of the shooting was Rick Scott. He's still the governor. We talked about him earlier. He was in office for 72 months and 2 days, a lot like the number 227 reversed. And the airport that the shooting occurred at, Fort Lauderdale Airport, opened exactly 32,027 days before the shooting. Again, you have the 227 right in there for the third frickin' time. And we know about this 227, 22 divided by 7. In Gematria, this equals 314. And on a calculator, this equation equals 3.14. 3.14, the first 3 digits of pi. Also, the word eclipse equals 314 in Satanic Gematria. You know, something to think about in relation to this story. We're talking about circles. How many degrees are in a circle? 360. You write out 360, you get 227. Again, it's Alt 227 on your keyboard. That gives you the pi symbol, right? And the location of this shooting, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, equals 360. So everything from, you know, the date of the shooting, the location. We're also going to talk about the name of the shooter and how that speaks to this code ritualistically as well. So notice the headline. He got 5 life sentences for the 5 murders he committed on that date. He also got 120 years in prison. 5 life sentences and 120 years. Why 120 years? Well, first of all, consider that the word eclipse equals 120, in addition to the fact that total solar eclipse has this 12-12 gematria. On the date of the 2017 total solar eclipse, the shooter in this story, Esteban Santiago, was exactly 10,020 days old. In Gematria, airport shooting equals 84. And this is pretty interesting in relation to an eclipse ritual. First of all, the word eclipse equals 84 with all reduction exceptions. The 84th prime number is 433. And 433 is the gematria of solar eclipse in the Jewish method. Also, in reverse extended, Esteban Santiago equals 4,330, right? And measuring from the date of the shooting to the date that he was sentenced is exactly 84 weeks. Also, the headline that they gave us, way up top here, about the sentencing, this headline even has gematria of 433 with the S exception. So the date that he was sentenced, August 17th, this was the 229th day of the year. The name Ashik Hamad, which was apparently this guy's Muslim name, sums to 229. 229 is the 50th prime number. And his name, Ashik Hamad, also sums to 50. in reduction. And we mentioned how this was all tied into the Governor Richard Lynn Scott, who's also got that 229 Gematria. So this shooting, January 6th, this is actually a Christian holiday. The holiday is called Epiphany, which is about the realization that Jesus Christ was the Son of God. Interesting that Epiphany and Revelation both have the same 49 Gematria in reduction, right? This day is also known as Three Kings Day. And Three Kings Day equals 146, just like Jesus Christ, 146. How about the fact that Three Kings has double Gematria of 354, both in the Jewish Gematria cipher and using prime numbers? Well, the word shooting also sums to 354 in Jewish, so interesting that there's a shooting, in relation to the eclipse on this date. Three Kings also sums to 53 in reduction. Not only is this the same as solar eclipse 53, the name of the shooter, Esteban Santiago, equals 53. The date of this shooting had numerology of 17 and 44. Notice how kill equals 17 and 44. The word shooting also equals 44 and 107 ordinal. So here's where it gets pretty, extremely obvious that this guy is just a made-up character. So we're talking about how Jesus was crucified under an eclipse, this all occurring on a Christian holiday, Three Kings Day. Eclipse equals 33, the age at which Jesus died at. And as I've been discussing throughout this podcast, 33 has a direct connection to 226 in Gematria. Crucifixion of Jesus, 226. The full name of the shooter is Esteban Santiago Ruiz, and that sums to 226 ordinal. This shooting was in Broward County, Florida, which has 226 Gematria in extended. Now, in Hebrew Gematria, Jesus sums to 316. This guy was born on March 16th, the date written 316. Are you freaking kidding me? And look at the name Gematria, Esteban Santiago Ruiz. In secondary Kabbalah, 316, just like his birth date. He was born in 1990. His name, Esteban Santiago Ruiz, equals 1990. What a joke. In Jewish Gematria, he's got this number 1330. This represents the number 133, which sums to 1331, just one number off. And remember, Jesus the Messiah has that Gematria, 1331. So it couldn't be more clear what they did with this fake news character. And just look at some of the pictures, right? Esteban Santiago. Look at this guy. Do you think they told him, hey, go out there and look like a mean badass when the cameras are out there, right? That's exactly what they told him. And that's why he's got this look on his face, He's not concerned about spending the rest of his life in an 8x10 concrete cell. He's out there to act. It's just a joke. Look at him. He's got that killer grin on his face, right? What a fucking joke. There's so much more about this. I'm already losing my voice here, guys. On the date of the shooting, he was exactly 1,399 weeks old. The word murder equals 399. It's also the 222nd prime number. This whole thing was related to the eclipse. Oh boy. Notice how there's so many Jesus numbers here, right? we know that Jesus and Jesus Christ both sum to 74. Santiago Ruiz and active shooter summing to 74. Jesus also has this gematria of 61, just like Santiago Ruiz, just like active shooter, just like Fort Lauderdale. All of these summing to 61. And as far as this being an eclipse ritual, the word eclipse equals 69. The shooting occurred 69 days before the shooter's birthday. All right. So there you have it, folks. That's going to do it for this 22nd edition of the Gematrinator podcast. Just remember out there, guys, you know, truth is under attack more than ever. So if there's ever a time to go out there and share this knowledge, you know, there's not many better times than now. I just want to point out that one of the blogs I have linked on my page, Extra Capsa, this would be the Brother Berg blog. Look what happened to his blog over this past couple weeks. They took it down. Extra Capsa, no longer available on WordPress. And this is kind of scary, right? Because, you know, I use WordPress. So, you know, I've backed up all my posts, all my data. Everything's backed up. And all my images even I've got backed up as well. So, sorry about that. So, hey, this is it's an information war that's being fought outside of InfoWars. InfoWars is just surface level stuff. Don't worry about that. They're going after guys like Alex Jones to get after guys like us who are sharing real truth, real knowledge, real information. And look, I understand a lot of people, you know, they don't want to talk about numbers to their folks, so just go ahead and link them to my videos. You know, I made the decision that I don't give a fuck how crazy people think I am a long time ago. And, you know, some people do think I'm crazy, but a lot more people think that I'm onto something. All right, everyone. Once again, that'll do it. Peace, love, God bless. Keep seeking and speaking that truth. Adios.